Welcome to the Thinc Conversations series, where we explore issues shaping South Africa. I'm Mathebula from the Thinc Foundation. I am in conversation with South Africans. I talk to influencers. This is more than a conversation. It is a thought-provoking engagement for a nation ready for the next 30 to 50-year takeoff. Today, we are exploring the subject of community resilience for economic empowerment. There are myths to be demystified. I'm joined by Titus Mafolo, former advisor to President Mbeki, an author and a historian. With us is Dr. Zakes Motene, who is a medical doctor by training. He works in Kalimo, a cooperative of farmers, and is involved in a lot of cooperative business. Now, Dr. Motene, Dr. Mafolo. You know, South Africa has been through a number of things. But one of the best things to happen to us is that we have solved the political power issue. Whether now it is moving, it's changing hands, it's another thing, but we have solved it. We can vote and direct it where it goes. But beyond that political power, are there any outstanding issues in the liberation promise that our Constitution is giving to society? Let me start with you. And Tate Mafolo.
Definitely, Prof. I think we obviously have achieved our political freedom, but as many black people will attest, there are many socio-economic issues that we still have to address. And there are lessons from history. There are lessons from people who are actually doing something today, which can actually be taken on board for us to take forward. But the most important thing is that for black people, political freedom is very important. However, as they say, you don't eat your vote. You don't eat the fact that you have voted. As Amika Cabral has said, people want something that will improve their lives, that will actually take their children forward. And as long as they don't eat freedom, they don't eat the vote, what is critically important is that freedom to be translated into a better life. And I think in 1994, Nelson Mandela did say that there must be a better life for all. But the question is whether that better life for all is being experienced by the majority of the people. And the answer may be in the negative.
Tate Motene, what would that better life be about, just to start?
Yeah, I fully concur le Mafolo. We have achieved a lot from 1990, 1994. Even our youth really feel represented in many spaces, including in decision-making structures in parliament, from municipalities, provinces, and so on. And we see their robustness in trying to break the mold, break out of the ceiling in terms of their drive for entrepreneurship. And I think the most important thing really is to give them that leg up, especially for people who still have memory of life before 1990. I like to make this illustration that a person who was 30 years old in 1990 voted for the first time when he was 34 years old in 1994. Today, 30 years into our democracy, that person is 64 years old. Some retired at 60. Those who are still working are retiring next year. Now, those people are a memory bank, and they have seen the transition from the old era into the new South Africa when we had economic growth, and they have seen the slump in economics. And the growing trend through that period has been unemployment that has been rising. So the economic part is really what all of us need to be focusing on, using the memory and the resilience of the past to encourage, build for the future, especially supporting the young people who have already shown promise.
Okay, so you effectively saying that you are sitting next to a memory stick here.
Absolutely. Fountain.
Yeah, okay,
knowledge.
fine. It's okay. But
Yeah.
look, consensus is developing in the country about something called an inclusive economy. What do we mean by inclusive? That well, who should be included, who's not included? What does it mean, this concept?
Well, firstly, I think, as Dr. Motene said, we must accept that a lot has been achieved since 1994 with regard to, housing, provision of housing, electricity for people who never had electricity, people in Tembisa who used to use the bucket system now actually have flushing toilets and so on. And so a lot have actually being achieved, students, free education and so on. However, when it comes to the economic inclusion, that is still a big problem. And I think we may want to look at two areas. One is the area which even Dr. Motene will talk about, the area where the need for communities to do things for themselves. And once they do those things for themselves, engage government to partner with them for the things that they are doing for their own socio-economic advancement. And there's history to that, the history of the Afrikaners, the history of black people through organizations such as NAFCOC. And I think we may want to just scan that history and look at the lessons that we can learn from there. Good lessons, some of them may be negative, but we can actually look at those lessons. And then we look at that and say, what is it that we can take to ensure that this freedom that we're talking about means a lot to all the people, particularly to black people who have never experienced economic freedom. So I think that is very, very important.
Okay. Now, you're speaking about NAFCOC, you're speaking about communities that must be ready to do that. But the country is also talking about black economic empowerment. But I want to remove the black and say, what would an economic empowerment strategy be? Just forget that it's for black people. If you were thinking about an economic empowerment strategy, what should that entail? Not for black people, just to empower everybody in a society.
Okay.
That,
If you don't mind, let's just scan history a little bit. In 1886, the Dutch Reformed Church took a decision to look at the problem of poor white people. 1886. In 1893, they then convened a conference to look at this particular problem. But of course, then there was the intervention of the Anglo-Boer War. But in the negotiations between the English and the Afrikaners in the Vereniging Treaty, the Afrikaners insisted that the properties for the Afrikaners must be retained and ensure that they must be retained, but for negative for black people must be retained at the expense of black people. So you had a situation where an agreement was reached between the English and the Boers, the English and the Afrikaners, that the properties that the Afrikaners had, land and so on, is going to be retained at the exclusion of black people. That is at the Vereniging Treaty. Fast forward, 1910 comes, and then the 1913 Land Act Act, which then ensured that 7% of the land will be allocated to blacks. Of course, it was increased to 13% in 1936. But here, where the Afrikaners were actually engaging government with regard to their own economic empowerment, ensuring that the land belongs to the Afrikaners rather than to black people, because land is very important for the economy. Within that period, in 1914 and 1915, when the First World War actually started, there was a meeting of the Afrikaners in the Cape, organized by the lawyer Willie Hofmeyer. Willie Hofmeyer then ensured that the Afrikaners will come together. They will then bring their own money and then form what they called self-mutual association. That actually ensured that there was Sanlam, Santam, Avbop, Volkskas, and many other organizations that were very critical for the economy of the Afrikaners. That is very, very important. So the Afrikaners community came together, contributed £100 at a time per person, and then put it in a kitty, and then ensured that there was an association that is actually going to create these organizations. That is in 1914. Fast forward, in the 1930s, there was the Carnegie Foundation, which came to South Africa.
Yeah.
And then it dealt with the issue of the white poor problem. So the Carnegie report, which came out of that, said, let's deal with this white poor problem. That led to measures that will then, in 1948, when the National Party came to power.
Just there, when you are saying the National Party came to power, we will be back with more on this.